We'll get into the slop fest of the Yankee loss last night out in Kansas City in a little bit. Touch upon a little football. Got our pick of the day coming your way a little bit later on the program too, Maggie. But we get with the Mets, and no, not their inability to read a radar or the fact that they start a game.
Why are they so bad at that?
I mean, they're just terrible. I mean, how many times, or the fact that they're getting set to play their 13th doubleheader of the season later on today, 4:10, resume that game trailing the Nats 3-1. Second inning, that game will resume. That'll be a 9-inning game followed by then a 7-inning game that will follow soon thereafter, Maggie. But
great. The less innings, the better.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you get all that. You sit through a long rain delay, and you really had time to think about what the acting general manager, Zach Scott, had to say, before the game, right? And we kind of had fun with the messaging of Pete Alonso, whether he was at his baseball camp yesterday and get interviewed by our own Daniel McCartan, or whether it be Sunday after they get swept by the Philadelphia Phillies. And then you get Zach Scott yesterday on a myriad of different things. And I guess to me the headline thing is the fact of, guys not buying in on multiple levels. Number one, with the performance staff and not taking care of their bodies or not hydrating properly, leading to some of these soft tissue injuries, to getting to the hitting coach as well. You touched upon that too. So, we look at, and I've talked a lot about how this team, we've talked about how this team kind of gets along, gets it when they're healthy. We understand they're not 100% healthy now, but even with the reserve stepping in, the bench mob and the like, that this is a good group, right? This is good chemistry, good clubhouse. Everyone likes one another. They were sitting in first place for a long time. We debated about whether or not the Mets are a good team or not a good team. You had Scott coming out yesterday saying they played mediocre baseball for the majority of the season, and now it's just unacceptably bad. So, yeah, I mean, that's what you get from Scott. I guess on a couple different things. Number one, when he looks at the players not buying in on different levels, I do think it's a circular process. And what I mean by that is circular process. What I mean by that is this, is that you have to convince the players that the route, that your process is the right
Say
one.
it.
Yeah, your process is the right one, Maggie.
Boost, Mr. Process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That you have their best interest in mind, that what you're doing is going to lead them to ultimately be successful, because that's where the communication does come into play as an organization, right? So it's easy to say, well, Maggie, you're not doing what I'm telling you to do. You need to do what I'm telling you to do. Well, right. Maggie, if you don't believe that what I'm telling you is going to lead you ultimately to be successful, you're going to continue to do it your own way, because you've had success that way. So it's easy to come out and say, okay, I'm blaming the players, right? I'm blaming the players. They're not buying into what we're telling them to do. But it's also on the organization to convince the players that what we're telling you is the right thing and is going to get the best out of you individually.
Absolutely. It should not be surprising that players are going to ask the organization, you want me to do this, why? Why do you want me to do it this way? How can you show me that this is going to get me better results than the way that I have been doing it my entire career? And also, we know when adversity hits, whether it's professional sports, anyone, you tend to revert back to things that make you feel comfortable or things that you feel like got you to where you're going, and that can create a fracture. My biggest question coming out of Zach Scott's press conference yesterday is, you have players who obviously are not buying into your process, right? There's a disconnect here. Do you know why the players aren't buying in? Have you asked any of the players? Because that's quite frankly not a given in this Mets organization, that they've gone to the players and asked, why aren't you buying into our hitting approach? Why aren't you buying into the rehab that we have laid out for you? Or why aren't you buying into hydrating and the way we want you to hydrate? I mean, what he was talking about yesterday was like everything from these big things to like the minutia of making sure you're hydrated. Like, why aren't the guys buying in? And if you had the answer to that, maybe you wouldn't be out here while the team's in the middle of a playoff race, basically airing the dirty laundry that the team in the front office are not on the same page about really potentially big things. Like, come on, you're a playoff race. I don't know if this is necessarily the time to be calling out guys publicly, especially for someone, and I just know this is the way the professional sports rolls, a guy who still has interim in front of his name, because you have a lot of other athletes who have much greater job security with the Mets, could be looking at him and saying, wait, you're calling me out? You? Are you even going to be here next year? Like, I'm going to be here next year because the organization is paying me X amount of dollars. I know I'm going to be here. Are you? That's a real thing that happens in professional sports.
Yeah, it's a great point. So then you say, okay, well, then maybe Sandy needs to be addressing the media instead of Zach Scott in yesterday afternoon. And I know Scott's done it on a number of different levels, right? Whether it be via trade deadline, whether it be coming on here with Craig and Evan during the afternoon,
Sure.
right before the MLB trade deadline, whether it be after they decided to fire Chili Davis, he went out there and addressed the media. So, he's become more of the face with that than Sandy has. But it's a fair point when you look at it, and there doesn't seem to be a commitment right now as far as Scott being the guy for this organization long term. But now it's a results-oriented business, right? So we're looking at this Met team, right? They were trailing the game last night, 3-1, right? They're going to continue that game this afternoon. Before the game, he spoke honestly. He said the performance is unacceptably bad.
And I like that. That's fine.
Which is true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unacceptably bad.
He said we'd wish we were mediocre right now.
Right.
We're not even mediocre.
No, and if they were mediocre, they might still be sitting in first place. I mean, honestly, they might be still sitting there in first place in the National League East, but they're not. They've been really bad. But then you get, okay, well, you have Alonso going out there preaching, don't just believe, no, we're going to turn around. We're going to look back 2 weeks from now on this and say, and we're all going to have a good laugh. All right, well, I just have the acting general manager saying, well, the problems run pretty deep here. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, that is the thing. So I'm looking at a Met team that's trying to rally in the last 50 games, that's now sitting 2 games out of first place in the National League East after the Phillies lost to the Dodgers last night, right? So that's where they stand right now. Going to play another doubleheader this afternoon. Alonso's trying to preach to the choir, telling you everything's A-OK, and I have the acting general manager saying basically the players have not bought in to what we are preaching as an organization. Not every single player, but enough to where he believes it is an issue. So then I said to myself, well, how exactly then is this team going to rally
Right.
and circle the wagons and be able to find a way to make the playoffs and win this National League East with all of that going on in the background?
Well, it's really interesting to get such a divergent message from the general manager, but then also from your star player and your manager. And they obviously need to keep a happy face on things. You want to keep the confidence up. I mean, Luis Rojas is probably going to have to do a lot of massaging of the message today with his players, or maybe he had to last night, because listen, it's one thing if Brian Cashman comes out and says it, and I think it's another thing if Zach Scott comes out and says it. Brian Cashman came out and said, we are unwatchable. This is a terrible product. We suck right now. All those things. But Brian Cashman's also been doing this for 20 years, and you know that he has, without a doubt, the backing of ownership. I'm reading Ken Rosenthal in The Athletic today, and from his reporting, it's that Sandy Alderson has been trying to remove the interim tag from Zach Scott, but Steve Cohen is the one who's not ready to make the commitment because there's still a possibility that he may want some big name person, Theo Epstein or someone like that, to come over and take over baseball operations while Sandy's the president of the team. This was a big thing to put out there for Zach Scott. You got a big matzo ball out there, and if the players don't respond well to this or say, why is this guy, out here? Why is our general manager out here, telling the fans that we're not bought in? I don't know, honestly, what good is going to come of that besides CYA for Zach Scott and the rest of the front office.
Right, trying to cover yourself for that, or realizing that, this is the final chip to put in the middle of the table. I got to get this team to respond. Am I going to sit on my hands? Because I'm sure, Maggie, he's well aware that Sandy's probably tried to work on the idea of getting that interim acting general manager tag removed,
right,
and naming him permanent, and that Cohen has pushed back on that. So
he's just being patient.
Right,
he doesn't want to make a decision.
He doesn't want to make the right.
Which I get.
Well, and that's fair, and Cohen owns the team, so he doesn't have to necessarily buy in. Plus, I mean, it was a messy offseason with Porter and Scott. I mean, it was just, I mean, the way that the Mets handled everything during the course of the offseason, I can understand the trepidation from Steve Cohen saying, I'm not willing to go all in right now on this group, and saying, you're my guys to deliver the championship in the next 3 to 5 years. But for Scott, I would say probably he said, I mean, I've got nothing else. I believe that I'm doing a good job. I'm giving these guys the necessary information in order to be successful. I need these guys to buy in. We have a short stretch here to try and salvage this year. I'm going to put out a memo or a message out there that the way they're going about your business is not good enough from an organizational perspective, from a responsibility as a Met player perspective. I'm going to call you out for your play, even though the manager won't, even though Pete Alonso won't. I'm going to do it because it might be the final chip that I have to play this season. Because you can honestly say, if this season careens downward and
heads are
continues
gonna
to
roll,
spiral,
I think.
that Steve Cohen's going to say, listen, guys, this wasn't good enough.
Right.
We need to be better than what we turned out to be, and it's alarming at how this season turned out.
Again, it comes back to why have they asked the players why they're not buying in? Because think about it, right? The way that like today's modern athlete is, guys telling them to do this, and that's in, conflict with what the Mets are doing. Is that the same with nutrition? Is that the same with your stretching routines? Is that the same with, and why you're getting these soft tissue injuries is because you have guys who have multiple voices in their head and they're not, maybe they're getting pulled in a couple directions. Who knows? I just know a lot of guys have their own team, if you will, that they surround themselves, because sometimes teams, I'm not saying the Mets do this, I've just heard this from other athletes before. Sometimes the teams can have like a one-size-fits-all approach to certain things. Again, I'm not saying that the Mets have this. I've just heard this before. And players are like, this is my body. This is my livelihood. I only have one body that's going to set me up for the rest of my life, achieve my dreams, whatever. I need a personalized thing for me. And it can't necessarily apply to the guy next to me. And I think a lot of guys even pay out of their own pocket for that.
Yeah, I would have.
Like hundreds of thousands of dollars just to keep their bodies right.
Man, imagine being able to do that. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, have someone help you take care of your body.
I feel like I'd know what they would tell me.
I know what they would tell me. It's clear.
Should we do our top three?
It's clear as day. I know what they tell me.
I think figuring you and I out, you don't need to be like a certified, nutritionist or personal trainer.
No, but just someone there to motivate you. I mean, you see guys that have the, athletes that have their own personal chefs, like Brady and all these guys that, that are making their meals every single day to keep you eating clean and keeping the regiment going and keeping the variety in and mixing things up. I mean, it's just an amazing life.
Can you just come in the breaks and hand us water and be like, guys, hydrate?
Water.
Can we get the IV?
I'll get some celery sticks.
Yeah, right. Orange slices like we're playing soccer or something at halftime.
Yeah, and
I need someone to come in at night and turn the TV off so I can go to sleep. That's what I need.
Right. But here's where, what, Maggie, would hit me, and you're right about guys and athletes, and I couldn't tell you which guy on the Mets or guys or individuals are looking at it. It gets down to kind of a organizational approach, what you want to preach, as compared to the individual approach, what's going to lead someone to be successful, right? So that's kind of, the hit and miss, the crux of the position when you look at the Mets and really every other organization. The Mets are not the only organization in Major League Baseball that have injuries. I mean, look across the sport.
Right.
As the athletes have gotten leaner, as the athletes have gotten more refined, I mean, the injuries have gone up and up. I mean, the Yankees have been trying to figure it out for years. The Mets are trying to figure it out. Everybody's trying to figure it out. As Mookie Betts is going to be out for a while now for the Los Angeles Dodgers, as that news came out before they take on the Philadelphia Phillies. So we've seen guys drop like flies across Major League Baseball. And it's
But the Mets have dealt with this before. Remember, the performance staff got booed on opening day?
You're right. They have. I get it.
A couple years ago.
Injuries across Major League Baseball has been a massive issue. I look at it where the approach for the hitters, right? They fired a guy, and I understand the Mets were not great situationally hitting last year. But Chili Davis did have a very, very good relationship with a number of players on that Met team.
Yep.
Pete Alonso being one, McNeil, Conforto. I mean, those guys, and you look at Michael Conforto this year is hitting 201.
Yep.
I mean, he's having a terrible year offensively. He's gotten benched, being platoon out there right field. Big contract year for Michael Conforto. So they're trying to switch it up and having this kind of team-wide approach. And sometimes as an organization, you need to, and this is on the Mets, you need to convince those individual guys, listen, we have your best interest in mind. We believe that we're going to get the best out of you. And if they don't believe, it's on you as the organization to show them the way, to show them and prove to them that your way, because that's the only way. There's too much money to be made. They've invested too much of their own time just to get to this point.
Right.
So you need to show the way as an organization that you have their best interest in heart. And if you're not doing it, I know it's easy for Scotty yesterday to go out there and blame the players and say, well, they're not buying in. It's also on you.
It's a reflection.
It's a reflection of the organization, no doubt about it, that you have to prove to them that you know the right way for them.
Yeah, and clearly that didn't happen, or it's not happening. And also, he just put it out there for the public to see that there's potentially like major dysfunction happening with this Mets team, which I think really took a lot of people by surprise. Again, we have this idea of what the Mets are with this group and this core group, and we want to believe they're such good friends and they all like each other and all that, and that could still be true. But obviously all's not well, and you now have that out there, and you don't think like, all right, you say soft tissue injuries and guys with hamstrings and obliques, and that's basically like, those types of injuries they're talking about. So you're telling me that now, you've basically given an assignment to all the reporters who cover this team to go figure out who are the people who are not buying in, because you kind of did this passive-aggressive thing where you didn't name who it was. You just sort of kind of lumped the whole team in, which, again, for the guys who are following the protocol.
Are we going back to the Conforto hamstring injury?
Well, they're not going to love that. If you are following the rules, you're going to be like, wait a minute, I got lumped in now as like, who are you talking about? Because if you're talking about hamstrings and you're talking about obliques, you could be talking about some of the biggest, highly paid, and most famous players on this team.
Right.
Because you're talking about maybe Lindor. You're maybe talking about Jacob deGrom. I mean, why you would want to ever alienate any of these guys is beyond me.
Well, and leave it open to speculation about who you're talking about. Because, and as you mentioned, lump everyone into kind of the same thing, because there are guys, injuries happen. I mean, you could be eating everything correctly. You could be drinking all the water, hydrating properly, Maggie. Injuries happen.
Especially
They're professional
baseball.
athletes. Yeah, no doubt about it. So that's what you got from Scott yesterday. Want to hear from you. 877-337-6666.